Welcome to the Adelaide Microsoft IT Pro Community User Group for the April session. I'm joined here with other host Brett Moffat.
Hello.
Apologies from Matt Klein and myself. I'm Andrew Young. Just housekeeping out the way first. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where we meet physically and virtually these days. And we also pay respects to the cultural authority of the Aboriginal people visiting and attending from other areas of Australia. Okay, so what's new? That was a very quick month, particularly for me. I was isolating at home. So here's the first announcement in general availability is System Center 2022. I don't know, this is usually Brett's jam, so I'll let him take this.
It was released on April 1st. I thought it was a joke there for a minute, but no. So System Center 2022 did actually drop without much fanfare or anything. The main reason there wasn't much fanfare is there wasn't much in it. If you are running SCOM, I guess the biggest changes to System Center 2022 is in the SCOM area with some integration into Microsoft Teams. So that's kind of cool, you know, being able to send alerts and so forth through into Microsoft Teams. So that kind of bringing the ubiquitous of Microsoft Teams into everything is pretty cool there as well. Enterprise Linux support for Ubuntu and Oracle Linux and Debian. It's kind of cool in SCOM there as well. And a new built-in read-only admin role, which is kind of interesting if you need that. Virtual Machine Manager had a bit of an update, and Data Protection Manager. I don't know many people around the place that are using Virtual Machine Manager, but Data Protection Manager I know some people here in South Australia are using. And it's now allowing item level restore for file and folder workloads as well. So instead of having to restore an entire volume, we can now just do file and folder sort of level, which is kind of cool. The biggest area, I guess, that most of us know System Center from is System Center Configuration Manager, or endpoint Configuration Manager, I think it's now called. That's kind of on its own skew now that it's heading off down the hybrid road to Intune and endpoint management being all one piece. So that's why it's dropped that System Center sort of component there. So that wasn't really a big sort of focus for the 2022 drop. Service Manager and Orchestrator also had a bump in version. No new features in those two. It's all about fixing some of the bugs and so forth. But we haven't actually had any information come from Microsoft yet about what was actually fixed in those two versions. So yeah, watch this space as far as the release notes and everything is concerned. So we actually have a meeting with the product team later this week. So yeah, we'll get to quiz them as to exactly what's been fixed and changed and so forth. But really, especially for Service Manager, for those that don't know, Service Manager is actually built on the SCOM framework. And as Microsoft look to move SCOM entirely into Azure, that'll be the next version of SCOM will be completely inside Azure. Service Manager will then be built on top of that going forward. So we're probably looking at a 2024 maybe sort of release for that. But Microsoft haven't abandoned System Center. They haven't abandoned Service Manager or Orchestrator or Virtual Machine Manager or Data Protection Manager. They're just evolving into different sort of areas, kind of like the same way that they did with Configuration Manager, to go to that hybrid sort of approach across from cloud and everything. So yeah, I'd like to say there's more interesting stuff with a full new release of System Center, but that's okay. We're still moving forward with it, which is good.
Sounds riveting. Yeah, it sounds like operations manager is the Azure Monitor, I believe, nowadays. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess it's going to be a lot of that.
Yep,
it's just consumption based.
Yeah. Yeah, so that'll move more, and we'll see more and more of that sort of move up into Azure over time. I mean, we did a presentation, a couple of years ago now on OMS that then became Azure Log Analytics. So yeah, that we'll start to see those sort of start to blur into each other there. SCOM and specifically SCOM will always have to have an on-prem version of it for air-gapped environments, but that hybrid nature of it, we're going to start to see that really, really grow over the coming years.
Cool.
Mm.
Moving on. So in preview, we've got, there is now Teams apps that are designed for Microsoft 365 being available within the context of Outlook and the Office.com home. What that really means is you could create, say, for example, here there is a Power BI dashboard created within Teams, and you can also embed that within your Office home and Outlook without leaving the context. I bring on my pointer. It's hard to use a laser pointer when you're not in person because I'm holding one. So yeah, so you got down there, that's your Office home, Office.com home, and then that's Outlook there. So really nifty stuff. So I hope to see more from that space. Some of us in the user group, I believe, have done a bit of security training, have done a lot of Sentinel, SIEM work, a bit of Defender. They do update their content frequently. That there is I guess it's not really an official certification, but you can do some extracurricular learning in Sentinel and custom query language. So you can go and consume some content, take a forms quiz, I believe it is, and you might be lucky enough to get a fancy piece of paper. The other long-awaited thing that's now in a new preview, apparently, is Microsoft Teams Connect Share Channels. So it's been a long time coming. Everyone wants to see what it does. So essentially, you can now add channels from one team into another. So in this example here, we've got a main group with a channel, and you can add that channel to multiple teams, apparently up to 50. So that's a very heavy used channel. The other uses, you can stick your meeting schedules in there, so everyone can go in the same context of that channel. So you've always got the same meetings. You have to manage 10 different recurring meetings in your week. And
I think that's going to be interesting. I think that's going to be really there's going to be a real dividing line when that comes in. I think for a company like myself with Cyrusson that I work for, it's going to be really useful because the number of teams I need to update about a particular thing, like Service Manager 2022 coming out, there's about 4 different conversations all happening in different teams, but it's all kind of on the same topic. This kind of integration is going to work really well for it. In a not so technical environment, I'm looking at state government customers here and attendees. We have a lot of customers repeating the same thing in different groups, and it all being in the same. I can just see now the same comment appearing 8 times in that channel. So yeah, it's going to take some relearning, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah. If I can add to that, we're seeing good potential for internal comms to have crucial messaging delivered from one channel and then shared into multiple teams. So it's good to do it in one place. And the other side to it is, we've got this ability for an org-wide team where kind of that's supposed to be the replacement for a Yammer network and having, open conversations. Mm-hmm. One good scenario is having a channel like you've done there, Andrew, in your example for IT updates, or another in an org-wide team for how do I engage with the marketing team? And so they don't have to be switching between teams. They can just have that sitting in their own team and just engage with the rest of the org from their own workspace.
Yeah, really tidies up the list of teams and channels in your own Teams client. So I guess the other side of it is it works externally. Let's try that again. So you can have your guest accounts secured away in multiple channels. This saves them changing between the organization within their Teams client, so they will see all those channels populated. So that'll be a bit interesting. So you can, I guess, in one team have multiple channels with different external people within that team, but they won't see any other channels or other people, I would hope. And I think we mentioned previously that the shared channel was going to be similar to a private channel in the way that it's created. So it's a separate SharePoint site in the background. That's how you've got your permissions set up discreetly. I don't know how many partners we have in the attendee list, but Microsoft is updating the partner program. It's now rebranded as the Microsoft Cloud Partner Program. Big changes are they're essentially making it easier, in quotes, for partners to get, I guess, the competencies. Again, they're retiring these competencies and bringing out these new designations for solutions partners. So there's a chance to get one of 6, and if you get all 6, you get a pretty one on the end there for all of Microsoft Cloud. And the other things are the benefits. They're all getting streamlined, so every business that attains one of these designations will get what is, I guess, equivalent to the gold number of benefits you'll get. So watch that space. I mean, Inspire should be in July as usual, so we might hear more about what happens there for those that are interested. On dates, so this week we've got the Business Applications Cloud Week for partners. Again, if you're a partner, handy because you can catch up on some Dynamics or Power Platform content and chance to get a free exam if you attend all 5 days. There's a Teams 10x Virtual Summit on at the moment, or in a few hours tomorrow. That will be, I believe it's US time. So jump on that if you want to catch up on some features and different ways of how to use Teams, and I'm sure there's going to be some cameos from some Microsoft people there, so keep an eye out for that, or just watch the YouTube recordings. I believe they've got a channel set up for it afterwards. Mark your calendars for May 24th to 26th. Microsoft Build is coming up. It sounds like they're going to skip any form of spring virtual Ignite conference, so this will be our next source of juicy content coming up. As usual with learning resources, there's still a 30 days to learn it challenge, virtual training days, some new exams coming in beta this month, and of course the training cert poster. So I'll share all these links in the chat notes after this. And next month, I think we've got our friend Rebecca Jackson lined up. We'll get a nod there from Darrell. So we'll have some social coming out soon on what we'll cover. So maybe along the lines of just what we're using and what we're not using. So that's the hint. But for this month, introducing Darrell Webster. His details there. So it's also MVP, and I'll let him do some more intro of himself. So I'll throw away now to Darrell. You're on mute.
Yeah. Too many mutes, too many microphones. MVP stuff, I kind of treat it like Fight Club. I don't like to talk about MVP Club. You won't usually see it in my creds. But yeah, hey, thanks for having me, Andrew. Yeah, Microsoft Loop, how about it? I want to ask, first of all, like I know we don't have a ton of people, but first of all, feel free to come off mute and ask questions as we go. The content that I've got it's about getting started, but it's also open enough for us to just push in and explore some of the questions around the IT Pro view of things. And I know there are a few things that are quite important for us all as we think about how do we manage this new way of working and what's the impact and security and compliance and all that sort of goodness. So I will jump into a couple of slides, and I am going to try and demo a few things as well. I am notorious for forgetting timing and just getting too carried away with people and content. So, yeah, someone will have to ring a bell or just say, "Shut up, man, bloody Kiwis."
Start seeing people leave.
Yeah. I can almost see the virtual seats emptying now. Yeah, so let's get into it. I wanted to start off by saying, like, here's a scenario about where I might use it. Brittany and I were meeting, we're sitting around and we've got to grab a piece of paper to take a few notes and collaborate. We are drawing on a bus stop. Don't worry, it's with a whiteboard marker. But the point is, we're trying to find somewhere to collaborate while we're having a conversation, write some things down. And this other scenario that happens sometimes is, okay, well, if we're doing this online, let's do it in a notebook. Yours or mine. I'll share it. No, you share it. Let's set it up. All these steps and all this friction about trying to get together and try and take notes or collaborate and throw your ideas. And then Megan, she makes I think one of the default suggestions that we all kind of go back to when we're all tired of seeing someone click around and not be able to share stuff. Just throw it in the chat. We'll get back to it later. We'll take some notes there. And that's kind of where my thinking starts with Loop, and also where it initially got introduced. Loop was and is initially a experience within Microsoft Teams. So we'll take a closer look and talk about the IT impacts around that. Let's pause here before I get into the agenda, and I can see everyone in the grid. Raise your hand, use your reactions, if you will, to just say, yep, I've tried Loop out. It is in my organization, it's running, and I don't know what to do with it. No, we'll forget that. Yep, Andrew has. Feel free to keep your hands up too. It's yeah, Richard. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah, fair call. Like, if you've missed some of the Ignite content or marketing videos because you're too busy for that, you head down and trying to fix something in System Center or whatever, it's pretty easy to miss, especially as it's rolled out. It's this unassuming little icon just below your chat, and you're like, what's that? And it's probably where you've got a few support tickets if your org doesn't know what it is. So we'll talk about what Loop is, what you can do with it today, when you would use it, and then some of the things that I've done to pull together about how to get started. But we're going to intermingle here with some of the obvious questions. If this is the first time you've seen it, your spidey IT pro sensors will kick in. You go, oh, hey, hang on. What about this? So let's talk about it, because that's going to be far more valuable than looking at slides, and we can just poke around and have a look in the environment. I do want to start off, though, by thinking, like, what is the challenge we're all facing in terms of work and hybrid work? Just framing that up. I know it's a familiar discussion, but I want to put it in a different way so that we can help think about why Loop. In fact, if I went back to this slide, I was considering getting Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy when he asks, why is Gamora? It's why is Loop? And we're always asking why. Hybrid work. Think about this scenario. We're in an online meeting early in the morning. We're at home or remote. Got it. Maybe some of us are returning back to the office, or we have the opportunity to go and connect with people in person. Bit of a contentious time at the moment, as some of us are, sadly catching COVID or trying to just isolate to keep our families safe. But yeah, this scenario will turn up again. We will meet in person. Maybe we'll be going back to hot desking and reduced floor space and all those cool challenges. We're deciding, okay, we're going to go home and work from home in the afternoon, get stuff done, focus time, that sort of thing. But as we're doing that, there's this swapping of the guard. That some people who prefer to work in the mornings at home, they might come in the afternoon and connect for meetings as well. So there's a change going on there. And then, our focus time, we might actually be contributing to a global project or people located in different places. But what's happening there in this scenario is that we're not necessarily working at the same time. And so this is the way of thinking about hybrid work in terms of time and of place. And I think there was another dimension that came out in another a discussion I had this week too. Haven't quite worked it in yet. But first of all, let's think of time and those scenarios in place. Our first person who's working remotely is is working in a different place to the people they're working with. They're working at the same time because they see them on the screen. So this is what is termed synchronous distributed interaction. Me trying to describe that to a regular person, I think, yeah, just, tell me, what does it really mean? But the concept is quite important because it's about pretty much what we're all doing, working remotely, and occasionally we're jumping on meetings and working at the same time. Our face-to-face is same place, same time. Cool, got that. Our different time and same place is that scenario where we might come into the same building, we might be working, but we're actually going to be working at different times. And so there's someone there in the office and in the morning and in the afternoon. It's probably not as significant in our hybrid working scenario, but it is a consideration. The last one here is quite important to us too. Different time, different place. We're working remotely, but we're not necessarily engaged in a real-time chat, real-time call, meeting, but we are contributing to something remotely. And so with all of these 4 scenarios, what we need is to have that capability to shift between all 4 in a smooth way so we can get work done, but it's not so jarring. And this is the challenge, really. I mean, with all the tech and all the choices that we've got, we, for want of better things, we still work in silos and which channel, which team, which folder, which conversation. There's all those sorts of challenges. So this is where we start to think about what is Microsoft Loop and where this fits into that scenario around hybrid work. And I was, trying to put some thought into how to explain this simply because Microsoft wordsmithing, they always come up with weird and wacky things like atomic units of productivity, and all of us IT pros roll our eyes and go, oh my goodness, like, really? Okay. I tried to show you the beginning of the Prezzo, that it's really simply a place to start. I know that we will eventually use more capable, full-featured tools, but just to get started without friction. And so that's where, when we're in a conversation, we're starting to collaborate where we are. And today that is in a Teams chat or in a private Teams meeting, but we know that there are other scenarios coming up there too. We can co-create. So we might start to put some words together, which might eventually be taken into a Word document or a PowerPoint or whatever. As you see in this little bit further along here in this video, it's also eventually a place where we can work like it's a canvas. And so we're not thinking about which team, which channel, wherever that content is. It doesn't matter so much. The security will still be true to form. But being able to curate and put that all onto a canvas to make it easy for your team, your group to find it, magic. Imagine your smorgasbord or your massive table. Or another way to think of this, if some of you have got these, you might have had project rooms where it's a long-term project. You can walk in, you've got everything up on the wall that is related to that project, and you just go in and focus. So that's the concept of Loop to me. I know it's early days yet, but that's the vision. Loop is considered or thought about in terms of 3 components. Come on, Microsoft, you chose another word to describe a thing. Never mind. We start with components. We've got pages and workspaces, and let's just explore each of those. Components are what we have today. And so in this example, we're starting a live or loop component from a Teams chat. We're giving it a name, and we start to collaborate. Now, we send that off, and anyone in the chat has access to that content that we're about to work together and collaborate on. So that's just a simple bulleted list, but it could be a number of other different things. And that's the start to collaborating together. And look, to be honest, I think it was a few years back now, it was at Microsoft Build, and they were talking about Fluid, and they published this Fluid preview, and I went and explored it, and I'm like, I'm a bit underwhelmed, actually. It just looks like a fancy notebook or notepad. But the more that you dig into it and the concepts behind it, we'll see what we get in terms of benefits there. Synchronization, it's pretty speedy, or good starting points. Components, as you saw, are pretty easy to add to a Teams chat. That's a Teams private chat today, and it's within your organization. No guests at this point. We'll talk about that a bit too. And I will pause to discuss some of the things that I've raised soon. Components, as we start off, we see there was a limited list there from the Teams chat, but once we've added one component, there are other areas too, or other components we can add to that page that's been created in the background. So expect to see this list continue to grow. If any of you have come across a product called Notion or Coda, they are much more further down the track in terms of maturity and capability, but Microsoft is going to follow a similar path, but with all that other additional capability of reaching and embedding into other places that we work. So we have components as a starting point, and here's a couple of examples. This is a loop I created. Initially, it was a bullet list. Then I added an agenda, which is it's a checklist with an mention and an indication of how long Matt's going to talk about that particular topic. Maybe we could add a table. So those are pretty cool. They were pretty basic when they first came out, but they're becoming more functional. So good use of being able to drag things into different orders and put information about each of your items. If you're familiar with lists in SharePoint or other things like that, then you'll get it too. Or our task list, and pretty basic task list. Now, glancing across that, one of the first reactions for anyone using fuller, richer tools is like, why would I make that my starting point? Why don't I just go to Planner or To Do or make my list somewhere? Why am I going to start at this simple point here? And it is really, again, what I illustrated earlier. Low friction, get in and make a start, capture those thoughts and the flow of those ideas, and then think about bringing it over into another tool. And I'll say this early, some of these experiences here, like the tables, the tasks, and those sorts of things, are going to be able to synchronize to the fuller, richer tools within the Microsoft 365 stack. So there is that roadmap towards making that happen, and they have a plan for that. That is public, so I'm not breaking any NDAs there. Components, another example here is that it can be shared in multiple places. This is the part that gets people a bit worried. They think, okay, so here's the content, I'm creating it, but then it can be shared somewhere else and someone else accesses it, and then it's changing. And maybe you've heard of this argument before too. So if I had a conversation about this and I had an opinion about that content, but it's changing, then how does that match up? Does that get me in trouble that I've shared an opinion about something, but now the content's changed? And, that's one concern that we might have to face as people, and maybe security and compliance, and thinking, well, how does that affect us as we collaborate? But the strength of being able to share it in multiple places is that it's bringing that collaboration to where you are. And today we can share it between Teams conversations. Not too far in the future, we'll be able to share the same things into for Outlook conversations, into email, into Whiteboard, into OneNote, and all sorts of other different places as well. So that component experience is what's going to be the center of a lot of rapid collaboration. Very fast and very quick. We've seen this sort of cursor live co-authoring stuff within Office before, but with this, it is similar. It's working out of a file. It is synchronizing those changes in real time, and allowing that co-authoring experience. Hey, I'll stop there before we get into pages. And are there any initial thoughts? If some of you have just seen this for the first time, or maybe you've heard a bit about it already and you think, whatever. Feel free to come off mute or raise your hand and do it that way. I'll pause for a bit. All right, there we go. We'll keep going. Pages.
Not much of a reaction to it.
No, I
Yeah,
think
I mean,
everyone-
I certainly, working in a company that I work in, because we work all remotely and everyone works from home all over the globe, these sorts of things, and especially with time zones and so forth, I think will work really, really well as far as getting new ideas for new products or new content being put out. So yeah, can totally see where this fits. Totally.
I've got a question / comment, I guess.
Sure thing.
Maybe one of each. So I guess the first one, I think one of the challenges when I first saw these sort of fluid items is like, where do they live? And I think that might be a bit of a struggle for people because they don't really seem to live anywhere. They seem to live kind of everywhere. And like that's something I have trouble getting my head around. So that's the first part of it. And the second part is you've mentioned that this is a sort of competitor to Notion, which I haven't used before. How do you think it does it sort of like, I guess, tread on the functionality of, say, Atlassian's Confluence at all?
Look, I don't have a lot of familiarity with Confluence, but it is sort of going down that track as well too about organizing information, and that's a picture that still needs to be clarified because what we have seen, and I have it a bit further along, is a bunch of renderings to say this is what it might look like, this full Microsoft Loop app, and it seems to organize information in a way that it could be strung together as an intranet of sorts, a way to connect information, and also a bit like a Wikipedia. It's going to be a case of choosing a tool that suits you, and if of course there's a lot of mature use in another product, by all means continue. I haven't shifted from using Miro Interactive Whiteboard because Microsoft released Microsoft Whiteboard, because Microsoft Whiteboard needs a lot of work. And it's the same that if someone looks at Loop today, they go, oh, whatever, I'm like fully into using Notion or Confluence. But it's as you explore how things integrate and how easy it is to get people to connect and work wherever they are, that's where you start to see the value. And today, maybe it's just quite difficult to visualize that. I like your first question though, and we'll look into that as to where that content is. I'll blast through some of these other concepts and then we'll get straight into that because it's important to see where that content is. And Aaron, you had a good comment there too. Didn't get much from the marketing video, but it's much clearer now. Exactly. The marketing video was like watching a Marvel trailer with about 70 Easter eggs, and you had to slow it down like to 2 frames per second, 2 frames per 30 seconds, and go, okay, yep, okay, that's right, yep. It was a bit like that. So, and I did that for the community. Pages. Right, so when we create a component, I'll go back to that beginning of that animation or video or whatever it was. We've created a component. It is actually creating that page in the background. If you have a quick close look at it, and maybe it doesn't really show it up here. No, but we'll have a look at it live soon. The file, the loop file, is created in your OneDrive when you're starting from a private chat or private meeting. And we'll talk about that too when we get to it, because that immediately, for collaborators and people in modern work, they go, oh, we don't want to stick anything on OneDrive, it should be in SharePoint. What are you doing? Cool. So we'll talk about that. But our page, we can open it up and we can start to add more components to it. And that's something else people don't realize. When they see a piece of the stuff around the loop and they go, oh, one component, so what? No, it's creating that page right there, and you can start to add more to it. So it's available in Teams chat today, and it is definitely in OneDrive, and we'll have a look at where that is. The other thing that they talked about in the initial announcement was a loop app, because, okay, great, our files are all in OneDrive, and eventually the capability will also be to create loops from a Teams channel, and so it'll be in SharePoint, so good. But how do we pull this all together and see it all together? And that's what the vision for the Loop app is it's one place to go to organize all of these collaborative canvases into a workspace. Imagine a project with a project room with a few tables with, paper and models and all sorts of things that are related to a certain work stream, and then another table with the same sort of thing and a wall with that. It's all about bringing that all together so it's in a low friction place to find that all. We don't really know what that will end up looking like. We've just got renders. They talked about it being released in the second half of 2022, but I don't know. If you've ever gone into the message center like I have regularly, sometimes the message will say, it's coming, and then the next day, and we've adjusted the timeline, and it's now 2 months later. So, yeah, I don't know. Let's take a quick look at some of these renders quickly. So, I don't know why they keep using unicorns and how that's supposed to be appealing to all of us, but it represents fun. We have a component here on the page. Got it. We've got floating cursors and stuff. So there is going to be that sense that if you're working with people, maybe you don't have to share your screen in an online meeting. You just have the application open, like I've got it open over here, and I'm looking at you over here and on the screen. And I just follow the cursor, and Colin might sort of motion to, hey, this thing about the associate for Van Arsdale Legal. Yeah. So if you get the idea, cursors. Cool. Page. Next slide, next animation. Yeah, so there's our page. So bordered there with that purple flashing thingo. And then workspaces. I think I did this wrong. I need to correct it. But workspaces are more about, let's say, budget and financial projections or designs. And a workspace, maybe it is. See, this is the thing about renders. Sometimes they feel like it's like a movie trying to explain the space-time continuum, and there's always movie sins to find there. They always get something wrong. Even Back to the Future, it used to be the purest thing, but now Marvel's argued against that. So I look at that and I think, I don't know, even this render looks wrong. But if we glance at that and think, hey, hang on, doesn't that look like Teams and channels? So why would I bother using that? And so we expect to see that same connection, that if you're working in Teams, then you'll be able to organize your loops into channels and into teams, and there'll be that one-to-one security connection so that it's easy to share. And maybe this is just a window through to, I'm going to focus on loop content today. But if you're working in Teams, you'll be able to access your loops, your Word documents, your PowerPoints, your project files and stuff. So, interesting future. There'll be more loop-aware experiences. I was asking the product group recently, what do you guys call these things? Because, I mean, it's a component when you add it, but then you add more components. So what do you call that embedding thingo? And they said, oh, that's a component. I'm like, oh, great. I've seen this pattern. Loop-aware experiences will be able to have that embedded component experience in other places. You've got Teams on the left. You've got Outlook on the right. Yeah, okay, that was it in action. Here we go. A recent GIF that explains that you can actually add that loop component directly into a new email message. As this GIF comes around, again, I'll point it out really quickly, that's going to be the new Outlook on the desktop, very much like Outlook on the web, very much. So it's going to help them to be able to iterate and update Outlook and various different applications faster, because it's basically using, I guess, the same code. Loop components equals Teams team. Yeah, could be. But you can see that it might start in Outlook and then it could be shared into a team, and it's the same loop. Now, let's bring it back to something familiar before loop existed. How different is this to creating a Word document? Let's say it's a proposal or a report or something. We put it in a team site, and then we share a link to where that is so that people are going to that live copy. We're attaching that to an email, or attaching that to a Teams conversation. It's still a live document, isn't it? We can go in, we can co-author, we can see the cursors going around. The main difference here is that it is embedded directly into our conversation, and it is a lot lower friction. So I don't freak out too much about content changing when it's attached to a conversation, because we already have that experience when someone shares something. And that's kind of the point, is to be able to change it and work along with it. But don't worry, because it's all stored in OneDrive and SharePoint, it's inheriting all of that compliance and security as well. So when you want to put on legal holds and various things to try and capture the versions and all those sorts of things to make sure that we've got it as a record, it's right there. Change tracking, not like the change tracking that we see within Word. We can't turn it on and see red lines of what's changing, but I will show you something live a bit later, which gives us a view into versioning and who did it and when. Too much talk, more demo. Okay, demo. Let's create some components in a live chat. We'll look at the anatomy of it and talk about security as we go along with that. Co-create a few things and we'll share some stuff. Right. And I'll just end that and come back to it. Let's start off with, that's right, I dragged the conversation over here. Boom. I'll use a zoom it tool so we can sort of look at this and not squint at a 4K screen. But let's put my experience over here, and I'm going to chat with Laura over, oops, I did that shaky thing. You know, when you shake a window and everything minimizes. Awesome. So we have my conversation up here in the top left. So we'll just focus on that. This is a chat, private chat with Matt. And let's think about that. Private chats or private meetings with people in our organization. If we hit record on a meeting, where does the file go? It goes into OneDrive and recordings of the person who started that recording. Similarly, I'm the person starting this collaboration. So Matt and I are chatting away about stuff, and we decide, okay, let's start taking some of this down together. And we're not going to go, oh, your OneNote or mine, your Word file or mine. Let me hang on. The first thing we're going to do is add loop to our one, two. I think I'm back. I always enjoy seeing screenshots of what awkward expression I've been making when that sort of thing happens. So if anyone's got screenshots, please share.
I've failed you.
So, okay. So loop, add it to a new conversation. Here's our starting points. That's what we have as a choice today. I like to choose something that's pretty simple, like a bulleted list if I'm coming up with ideas. And at this point, it's a conversation with Matt and myself, and I'm adding loop to our conversation. He doesn't see it yet. I'm just starting to set this up. So really quickly, I'm like, okay, this is ideas for Adelaide UG. And I could start adding content. I'm not going to because I want to start collaborating with Matt really quickly. I, at this point, can also choose permissions. Now, does this look familiar for people who've shared documents before? Or, yeah, of course it does. Consistent, same experience of choosing permissions. But what is this permission setting? When I set, that's my default, by the way, people in my organization, when I share a link to this loop after I've sent it, then it can be on-shared to anyone else in my organization. So if I want to go wide with my collaboration, then I can leave that setting there and allow that to govern who can access and join us in the loop to collaborate. Notice this is grayed out at the moment, anyone with this link. Now that could be because our organization has turned off sharing with anyone, and maybe some of you have that as a governance point. But it's also turned off at the moment because they're not supporting guest collaboration with loops at this stage. That means that if I was in a chat with Andrew in a private chat, but across organizations, I can't add loop and collaborate with them on that loop yet. But I expect that once they've opened that up, the loop being in OneDrive will allow us to have some of that same security and follow those same patterns around whether or not we can share a loop file with a guest or external contact. Similarly with private meetings, private meeting where we are just having it internally with people of our own organization, fine, we can add a loop to that. If I initiate the loop, then I'm the one that's creating it and it's in my OneDrive. But if I've got guests in that meeting, people not from my org, then it's not going to be an option. There'll be no loop option there at this stage. Permissions, right? So if I want to get more granular, people currently in this chat, so that's going to be quite granular, just Matt and I. If there was Matt, Laura, and someone else, then that's going to, narrow it right down, and only the people in this chat will ever be able to share this loop. Until I change the permissions in the background. They can't take the link to the loop and on-share it to someone else in the org. It's only for people in that chat. And specific people if you want to go above and beyond the people in this chat. So familiar kind of choices in this experience. I'm going to stick with this option just so that we can demo it a bit wider, but you kind of get the gist as we're working through that. This sets the permission for the link that is about to be created. So I will send this off now, and because Matt's awake down here in the bottom right hand corner, we should see Matt appear there pretty quickly. This is Matt, isn't it? Come on, Matt. I did send it to Matt, didn't I? I did. No, that's Laura, doofus. Let me drag Matt over. Clever lad. Doofus is a very professional term. We often use it when we want to get work done. So there's Darrell in his conversation with Matt. Cool. Now, let's zoom in on Matt. We've started that loop. It's there in chat. Matt is in there. Matt can actually see I'm in there. I can see that Matt's in there. So there's our, collaboration happening in real time. Doesn't feel like magic. We've seen all this before. But what was I going to show here? So later we'll mention someone in here and go through all that kind of magic. But I'll start to add some content. So this is ideas. We're going to talk about System Center 2022. And the other thing was shared channels. Okay, so down there, it's all happening in real time. Great, seeing that in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, magical. What about if I wanted to loop Laura into this conversation as well? I could add her to the chat, but maybe I don't want to share the conversation that we're having around this content. Maybe I just want to share the content and get her to contribute. So this is where that copy link comes in. Matt's like, okay, great. I think Laura can contribute to this. So he copies the link and he's going to go over to his conversation with Laura and we'll go, hey, Laura, you can contribute to this. So I can't paste it into that. It's got to be in a new conversation. It begins to embed. There it is. And we stood. Oh, right. And I haven't sent it yet. Right. So it's not quite there with Laura. I'll send that. And now we'll see Laura should appear if I've got her still awake over here. Funny thing is, and this makes sense, I guess, if the window is not alive and kicking, if it's minimized, of course it's not going to be awake. But we'll go down to our new message. And there it is, right? So we're adding people to collaborate on the content, but the conversations are separate. Maybe I've said something sensitive about an idea or some IP or something in my conversation that's quite separate from the content. So I'm talking with Matt privately, but we wanted to loop Laura in and make it part of that conversation. So that's cool. Let's extend this a bit. I'm going to go back over here to, I'll go with Laura, for example. No, Matt. We'll go with Matt. And we'll open up and have a look at where this content lives. So this is one quick and easy way to get to it. This is the link to the loop. It actually became that, sorry, the file was named after I sent it and I'd given it a title. So that becomes the loop file in the background. Let's open that up and see it in Matt's OneDrive. So it opens up in office.com, and that's where I can start working in a larger, fuller space. And maybe I want to add, let's go / and add a table. All right, and now I've got another loop component that I can add here. So this is item description. I'm going to misspell all sorts of stuff. Assigned to, and then date. And so everyone's getting that same content. So it's all in sync. Got it. Okay, but while we're here, let's have a look at where this content is. Top right-hand corner, that's the name. Okay, today it's called .fluid, but recently in the message center it talked about .loop. It's going to be changing, so it's all consistent, and it'll be called a loop. And this is sitting in Darrell's OneDrive. So let's go, and in a folder called Microsoft Teams chat files. So Matt has permission to see a few things there that have been shared with him, because he's been looped into a few conversations, or collaborations rather. And there's our file, ideas for Adelaide.fluid. Sitting in OneDrive, following all the usual security and compliance and capabilities around OneDrive. At this point, I'm like, okay, so great, it's in OneDrive, but what if I wanted to move it? Maybe we've got this loop to a point where content's good. I want to shift it over to a team so that it's more available to the rest of my team. Today, we could move the file. So I could go through those motions, go here and say, move to, let's pick a team, pick a SharePoint thing, but it's going to break that capability of being able to embed it somewhere. So not something we can do quite successfully today. Yeah, it looks like I haven't really folded any SharePoint sites, so I don't have any choices up there or much. But I can move those around. But today it's going to break that capability. I know it's a larger conversation, but this thought about content within OneDrive. Why do things keep getting stuck into OneDrive? And we'll just go into Laura's OneDrive, for example, and take a look. Now you've got recordings. There was someone who did a really great blog post who pulled out all the different folders and applications within the Microsoft 365 stack that are creating folders in here for various reasons. So I'll find the link and share it somehow with Andrew to pass on to you. But with Microsoft Teams chat files, that's where our loops are going to be stored. Probably not a great example because Matt doesn't create many recordings, but there'd be recordings there. Why do we keep sticking stuff on OneDrive? And if we think about that security question and where we're creating this content, we're in a private chat. So it is between Matt and myself. And is that the right place? By all means it is. If I shifted that off to a SharePoint site or a team, that's not the right place to create the content initially. It's an idea between myself and him, and we're waiting patiently for that capability to shift it to that wider space. Much like with a Teams meeting, I'm in a private meeting. I've invited a few select people. I hit record, then it's those people which will inherit those permissions to just that file. And so, while OneDrive is a bit of a headache for us when it comes to people who leave our organizations, hopefully we've got great offboarding procedures where we assign that permission to a manager or to someone who can still access the content. And yes, eventually we're going to see that capability of all of those loops that apparently have got people connected to it will be able to be shifted to the right places. but yeah, and look, the other question there too as well, what if the OneDrive gets deleted? Well, again, if you've got good offboarding procedures, and if you're using things like legal hold, or you've got a good compliance policy, then the content isn't going to be lost. But yeah, I hear you. Just another thing for us IT pros to try and manage. So OneDrive today, SharePoint at some point tomorrow as well. Pausing for any questions and like things that make you think about that. I haven't seen anything in chat. Do any of your spidey senses go off when you think about this?
I have another question, Darrell.
Yeah.
So our business is very I guess ingrained in the Microsoft ecosystem. We use Azure, we use SharePoint, Teams, et cetera, et cetera. Do you find that, this might be a divisive question, but do you find that Microsoft just sort of keep coming up with solutions to sort of non-problems, I guess you could say, and maybe repeating themselves a little bit as well? Like, I sort of feel like some of this stuff's really cool, but I think you mentioned it already. You've already got like lists in SharePoint, and you've already got Planner, and you've already got To Do and tasks, and like a lot of this stuff, excuse me, it seems to be like a little bit repetitive and a little bit disjointed, and like I'm sure they've got good intentions, but it just sort of concerns me sometimes that there's no overall governance about it. And when people sort of discover these sort of functions, they sort of ask me, where does it, like, how do I use it, or which one do I use, or how do I make sure it stays safe, or all these sorts of things. And it just sort of seems a bit messy. I don't want to be rude about it. It's just,
no, not at all.
Yeah, I just, sometimes it sort of gets me a bit nervous, if people are tracking something and done this work, and then they're like, well, I don't know where it is.
Yeah.
What do you like that, if any?
Yeah, no, that's again a lot to unpack, but first of all, thinking about Microsoft coming out with solutions that seem to be like, was there really a problem? And we're quite happy to use what we've got. Yeah, you're right. Like, we could continue to use the fully functioning tools, and we should, because that's what they're for. They've been developed. You've got Microsoft Project or Planner as you come down the more capabilities list to manage your own tasks. Why would we start collaborating on a paragraph when we could just open up a Word document? And it's really the essence is in, what does it take to get to that point while we're in the flow of ideas and work and collaboration. So sure, we will eventually go to our plan and build out our Kanban board and our buckets and our tasks and things. But if it was just that one-off or a few people, are we really going to spin up a whole Planner and Office 365 group or team or something like that along with it to, and what time does that take to do that, when we could just start to write something on a virtual whiteboard in a sense, but, a bit more functional. So you're right, like envisioning how and where does this fit. Today it's like, look, it feels kind of gimmicky to some, like I don't get it, because it just seems like a flash notepad which can do co-authoring. But yeah, it's and I also feel that burden that the IT pros also have, especially if you don't have necessarily a group that looks after training, or even the Microsoft 365 sort of vision or stack or change management in general, dealing with the people side of it, that IT pros sometimes get landed with that too. Hey, you know about this stuff. You're the M365 guy. You stuck your hand up and flinched when someone said SharePoint, so it's your responsibility. You get to answer these questions. Yeah, but hang on, boss. I'm trying to work on this system over here, and it's down. I've got to plan this over here, and now you want me to talk to people and train them? No, I don't have time for that. I barely even know what this thing is, because it just sort of flashed up in some blog post that I saw, and I just scrolled past it. Constant challenge, hey, for IT pros. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And that's where like I get the buzz out of being able to be part of that picture of helping to streamline what is important and good and sits with those scenarios that people use to work. That's what real change management is about, and adoption. It's not about here's your 50 tools and you just choose what feels good to you. The let's turn it all on and just let it all happen. Yeah, that's fun. But really sitting down with the key people and saying, what are your current challenges? And is hybrid work a true challenge for you? And do you need to try and provide a lower friction way of getting ideas and creating content and collecting it together that will eventually come into a fuller tool like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, To-Do, Planner, etc. Yeah, I think it'll take a while to see this from experience too, and I hope to be part of helping to tell that story and iron out some of those challenges. Good stuff, Josh. Anyone else got a question?
Probably add to what you've mentioned there before, whether you want to create a planner or a group out of that.
Yeah.
Most businesses, well, some would have restricted the creation of M365 groups. So
Yeah.
Users would then find a new tool and they may discover Loop components, and that's where that group may happen.
Yeah, exactly. Like when it was open in the wild, wild west, and we, the consultancy I work with, WM Reply, one of the things we've got is a couple of tools and workflows to go through and see what about all those thousands of groups and teams and stuff that have all been created and aren't being used anymore, and they maybe only have one person. It's a headache to look at that list, let alone think about how do we deal with it. So at least this circumvents some of that. Let's create a whole SharePoint site and a whole Office 365 group. And like the other side to it too is, do we have something that already exists that we can use? Hey, Laura, Matt, Darrell, do we have a group or a team or something in common where we can go into a channel and just create a plan or create a channel and purpose that? And sure, by all means, maybe you will eventually do that. But while you're in the moment, then maybe use Loop instead of that piece of paper in front of you or scrambling for a OneNote notebook. And I think build from there. That's the part that because it's so limited in how it's been released so far, it's this unassuming little icon that seems to give us like a notepad on steroids with co-authoring and sharing and stuff. We're like, okay, what else does it do? And I think that's what they're hurriedly trying to release and show. The big vision that they have here, I think, is it's about unifying that collaboration wherever you're working. So we know the next thing that's going to be released is the Outlook experience. Today it's Teams, but also what are the other things that we can bring in and connect into this collaborative experience? They're leading with a couple of their own systems internally, like Dynamics, so that, what is it called? I forget. You're typing away in an email or a Teams thing or something, and you mention a client name, and it goes off and reaches into the record for that client, and it suggests a few things that you might want to attach to the conversation, so that people can find that and then click through to the full story or the full record. And that's all that thinking around working fluidly, which was the original thinking and design and naming for it. But yeah, we certainly aren't going to solve the problem today or tonight. Hey, how am I tracking for time, Andrew? I know like it ends at the top of the hour. We good to keep going?
It's 10 past. How much more have you?
Oh, I mean, I've gone into as much as we kind of need to in terms of looking at the live content. I usually buzz through like a demo of how we might use it in the scenario of a meeting, which is not easy to do when you're on a meeting. But essentially, like let's just do this real quick. We'll go into here and create a quick meeting. Let's go follow up from UG. Will require Laura. I like to try and prepare more than just an invite. You know, I like to add an agenda and various things and you know, attach things that people are going to need to collaborate in the meeting. So here's what I currently do with Loop if I'm trying to think ahead and collaborate. So I've got the meeting, I've got the invite. I'm not going to add a channel or location. Usually I'd put in an agenda, but let's send that off. Right, so as soon as I send that off, it's going to set up an online meeting. Cool. But the vision here too with Teams is that you can join the conversation and you can chat with participants before the meeting and during the meeting and after the meeting. Cool. Okay, got it. So here I am, I'm chatting, and I'm going to create a loop. And I'll, let's put a bullet pointed list. No, let's go paragraph this time. Agenda for, whoops, follow up from UG. Let's just send that now and we'll worry about adding content later. So now that's part of the conversation for Matt and Laura who have been invited to the meeting. I'm going to add / in agenda. I'll just, I could add various things here to say who's going to be talking at Laura. Great, we've mentioned her. Actually, I'll put the thing that she's going to talk about. Prioritize ideas. Whoops. She'll speak on that for 20 minutes. Right, so over here, Laura's got this pop-up that, oh, Darrell's mentioned you in a loop. And so here it is, pop-up. Okay, I've been mentioned. I haven't joined the meeting chat yet, but I can see that Darrell's already working on a agenda and some various things. So maybe I'll just say, yeah, that's cool. I'm going to also suggest another thing on the agenda, like review feedback from users or whatever. So we'll assign that to Matt, and Matt is going to cover that for 15 minutes. Right. So what we're doing here is we're building out a collaborative space that we can use before the meeting starts. Let's add a table for ideas, and then maybe a task list, which there's going to be more options for tasks, a status tracker, something else as well. But these sorts of things, when used in a meeting, will eventually connect through to Planner and synchronize to that. So there is a view to how that will work. They're still ironing out how smooth that will be. But it does mean that it will synchronize to a more fully functioning tool, which is pretty cool. So yeah, get the point here. Like I'm trying to add it to that meeting experience, and then when you know we drop in a few things and we prepare content, like let's go here, preparation. Give that some formatting. Maybe here, add a hyperlink to something. So it could be read this and then hyperlink to a document. Eventually we'll be able to embed like a little chiclet version of a file that they can just click on and it will open and you can read it together. Yeah, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, that's like putting it into a scenario that we all face at the moment. Now, we probably don't all think to set up a meeting so that it's already got that collaborative space, but it's good practice to get into if you're organizing a meeting, because then people aren't scrambling for, where do we take notes again? And where are we recording ideas? And what's the agenda? It's all there. It's attached to the meeting, easy to find. So I usually go through that. I've got a bit more content that we could sort of talk through. I've got this where I step through the continuum of when you might use this in terms of ideas. When you're forming things and it's quite temporary, you start looping more people in to contribute to that idea. You sort of go a bit wider now, that maybe it's something it's more permanent. It could be something you can go back and refer to it. So you've got your Canvas style content that you're collaborating, you're bringing it all together so it's easy to find. That's one thing I think that much as Teams brings us all together in one place to work, we're still going, which channel, which team, which conversation, let's go to search. Okay, search, it's a bit hard. But if I can put like the 5 things that I want people to read or engage in and use and contribute to onto one canvas and say, here you go, then it makes it easier for them, and it doesn't matter where content is. Eventually, of course, it goes to a fuller tool like a PowerPoint. So when you're planning a presentation for a conference or something like that, you're sharing your ideas, you're working together, you pull it together into that PowerPoint, and then it becomes the thing that you use to present. So that's just one cycle or collaborative loop in terms of a life cycle. Some other concepts here which might be important to you. I'll share the deck later that you can review it, but where you might use it in unplanned situations versus planned situations. So that planned situation was the meeting. You've seen the demo that I just quickly ran through. And this is a section where maybe it doesn't concern so much the people on the call, but how do we get people on board, and what sort of scenarios are going to be most valuable as people start to use Loop? Meetings, definitely. We're all in them. Wouldn't it be great if we all started again in the habit of adding an agenda and a place to put those notes? And that's something that will be coming. It'll be easier to do directly from that meeting invite. Do you want to add notes? Cool. And it'll add a loop capability right there. Agenda, meeting notes, follow-up tasks, right there in the meeting invite. Various different things that we can use. I've got a bunch of resources because I'm watching the topic pretty closely. And I think it's going to be interesting to try and help people out to see the potential rather than blogging about it, creating videos about it, and just having it as like independent things out there. I've tried to pull it all together into a course. It's a free course at the moment, and just go there and learn together as a community and give some feedback. We've got a Loop user group as well in LinkedIn, and that's trucking along nicely. We're going to have our second round of sessions, and try and make that quite collaborative. So slightly different format here because I've been talking blah, blah, blah for ages. But what we do on this one is it's almost like a TED talk, 20 minutes, boom, and then equally 20 minutes where we go off and use breakout rooms within teams. And in small groups of 4 or 5, we can talk about the topic and actually connect with people rather than just watch some idiot Kiwi wave his hands around in front of a camera. Interesting experience. I like the questions that have been asked, and there's certainly common ones. Thanks, Josh, and those that have dropped them in the chat as well. Any other thoughts as we sort of finish off the topic and let us wrap it up?
I've just got one around licensing.
Yes, Amanda.
Is this part of like sort of standard Microsoft licensing, or do you need to upgrade licensing to get access to it?
It will reach down to the business level where you have, I think it's business standard. One where you have the online services. So if you get SharePoint, if you get Teams, Loop is going to be part of that. It's of course not going to reach down to just an Office subscription, but it will go to business, to enterprise. It is arriving in government. It is available in EDU. So they are trying to make it available to lots of different places. Does that answer your question, Amanda?
Yeah,
it's included.
See if it's part of my Office suite. Thank you.
Yep, excellent. Cool. Josh, you had another question.
Yeah, just a really simple one this time. When you create a loop in a one-on-one Teams chat with someone, if you continue the conversation, does it push that that you want to call it that page
content?
or that content box? Does it push it further up the chat as the conversation continues?
Yeah, it does actually, and that's a good point, right? So here we go. I'm chatting with who am I chatting with now? Oh, that's the meeting. Let's chat with Matt. Yeah, so it pushes its way up, and as you would expect, and you're like, okay, so great. How am I going to go and scroll back and find this content? Where is it? What is it? One of the things that I get in the habit of doing is, and this is a feature arriving in Teams, is pin that. So where another practical scenario where I'm using it is in one-on-one meetings with people that I manage, or just people that I meet with internally. And so it's easy for me to find that loop. I can, wherever I am in this conversation thread, I can just jump to that and boom, there it is. And we can start taking notes. What I expect to see though, Josh, is it will become probably a tab as well, where it's not that I have to find where it is in the conversation, but it's easy to just go in there and see it. And then that vision later of this thingo experience, workspaces, where I think there's going to be a one-to-one connection here between Teams and similarly what we'll see in the workspace or the Microsoft Loop app. How do I find this content? It's going to be organized into the workspaces that we have, and over here we might even have a live chat or a live meeting directly within the Loop experience, leveraging Teams. It's always fun to talk about what's coming and try and skate around the possibility of, am I setting an expectation that's going to get me in trouble and booted from the MVP program or something? Yeah.
No, I understand it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
I mean, see how it evolves, and whether it becomes, a standard part of an M365 group when you create it, just like a notepad, notebook or whatever it does. Yeah, I'm interested to see how it evolves. I'm not going to run to my managers and say, "Oh, look, this is really cool." Just yet, think about it. But
exactly.
I'm certainly going to keep my eye on it.
Yeah, I think a way to begin to dip their toes in it is when it arrives in a meeting invite, and you can add that as something at the bottom of your invite in terms of agenda, meeting notes, and tasks. That becomes quite useful. Think about this, that when we want to go back and find out what was said, we go back to the chat for the meeting. When we want to see the files, we can use the Files tab. Cool. Recording, it's all attached there to the meeting. But if we're actually making notes together, we're listing out follow-up tasks that we might then transfer into a planner or something. It's all attached to that meeting. So it's just quietly there, and you can just quietly start to use it, and people are like, okay, so what's that thing in the chat? Okay, well, we'll contribute to it. So that's just a gentle way of leading in as an early adopter when it takes your fancy.
Yeah, cool. Sounds good.
Awesome. This has been great. I know it's been a small group, and I know some people might have just treated it like a podcast. We're listening to someone prattle on about a new tech. But yeah, it's been good.
Also, I've got a question there asking about versioning.
Oh, yeah, good. See, there's so much there to show. I do forget sometimes what to show. Let's get back into versioning. So, I did want to show you something maybe here. Find something here. All right. So this is me. I'll just zoom in on that. And I've found a loop where I've collaborated with Matt, and I want to see what has changed. I think Josh asked about tracking changes. I can hover over, and this I think will become a bit clearer too eventually, but I can hover over and see where Matt has contributed. So here's something that Laura and someone else has contributed to. And Laura added to this on 25th of whatever, and I added to that. So cool. Granularly, I can see, okay, well, who made that change or that comment? But if we go over to our OneDrive and into our loop, we are going to see version history, which we can get to when we've got the loop open. So here we've got versions 1 through to 5. So that's pretty standard SharePoint stuff because it's in SharePoint and OneDrive. If we're in the loop, if we have the loop open, there was one of these thingos up here. Oh, it was actually here. Yeah. No. I forget now. Might have moved it. There was somewhere on this page where you could go and you could see the list of versions. Yeah, it used to be somewhere up here, so I think they've changed something else there. But yeah, you see that you can find that version from OneDrive, and if I poked around for long enough, I'd probably find where the version trigger is. Yeah, but it will be in the page as well, so you'll be able to see the version of what's been created. It is think of it like a Word document. It's just another file type. It's Word, Excel, it's PowerPoint. Question there from Aaron, which I can try and answer. If we've got time, we've got time. Always interesting collaboration tools as my organisation spread across the world. Yeah, I feel that pain. And they're really struggling with which file to create, how to share them, and permissions on collaborative files. And this also feels like another file to think about, doesn't it, Aaron? Like, okay, now we've got Loop, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, lists, libraries, etc. Hopefully, what I've been trying to show is that it's a simple way to get started on ideas, and that they don't have to stop or live there forever. We have quite a bland looking page here now in terms of, and this is what I meant by a flash notebook, but eventually we're going to be able to see other things and add other things to this kind of page as well, so that it becomes more of a canvas and more useful. It may give them a good starting point so that, yeah, they can think about where it lives later. Exactly. So today I've got to grab let's just find something, administration doc, copy link, and I go, read this. So, right, well, at least it doesn't put a dirty, great SharePoint link, which is ugly to read. It formats it nicely. But eventually it's going to be a little chiclet that may even have a preview of what the document looks like, and it's just a bit more attractive, and you'll click on it and you'll go into that collaborative experience. So I might create a list of things that I want people to check out and read and do or contribute to, and then they can just control click, and there's the admin guide to something, some Contoso something. Awesome. Love the Q&A time. What time is it over there now in Adelaide?
It's just about 5:30.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, look, it's been good to connect. Usually I'd throw up a slide there with my connection details. I guess I could do that briefly. I like to introduce myself at the end of a presentation. Because who wants to hear about me and what cats and cakes or whatever I've baked recently, and yeah, that's cool. But that's me. I work for WM Reply as a change and adoption lead. I've had a lifetime in tech as well, so I know how to talk both sides of the fence, and that gets me in trouble. Find me on Twitter. I create content at Modern Workplace. Ooh, got to update that. Modern Work Mentor. Boom. Cool. Thank you very much, Adelaide, for having me at User Group. It's been a good evening. It's here. It's 8 o'clock.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for making time for us.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Darrell. That was really good.
Fantastic. See you all in the ether, as they say. Somewhere out there.